Howdy, everybody. I'm Stu, W0STU. Welcome. I wish I'd drawn a bigger crowd. But we're going to discuss tonight our W0TLM license classes, some of the aspects of that you may not be real familiar with unless you've been intimately involved. How many of you, just curious, how many of you in this room are a graduate of one or more of our license classes? So probably not Jim. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I got a half a dozen or so in here. Oh, and Tom. Okay, 7. Great. So we've been doing this for a long time. And I want to give you a little bit of background. Now, this fellow here, he's doing it wrong, okay, because it's not that hard. And in fact, we've made it very easy here at W0TLM to offer these license classes, and we try to do this about twice a year. And so you'll understand a little better what I mean by we've made it pretty easy as we go through the presentation here. So what I'd like to discuss with you is kind of a brief history of our W0TLM license classes, how these got started years ago, and how they have evolved over the years, our class structure, and some of the methods that we use in the classroom to kind of keep students engaged and hopefully actually learning and not just brainlessly memorizing questions and answers. Then some examples of our instructional materials that we're using currently, most particularly the brand new technician license course content that we're going to be using. And most importantly, perhaps, if you want, how you can pitch in, how you can help us out by being an Elmer in our license classes this fall that we're going to offer. Some of you have done this in the past. Lauren has been an Elmer for us, I know. How was the experience, Lauren, of an Elmer? Oh yeah, you need that microphone, sorry.
To be perfectly honest, mixed.
Yeah.
Positive for me. Sometimes it's a little bit like herding cats because you've got 3 or 4 students who have lives and they don't always blend with what you would like to do. But it's rewarding when you get questions, and the questions kind of are all over the place, and just share experiences. And the feedback has been very good for those that have been taking the classes seriously.
Yeah.
You know, and things happen, so not all of your students that you're Elmering are able to proceed because they have lives and whatnot, but it's very rewarding, I think.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, one of the things Lauren mentioned there I think is very important, and is that after each of our classes, we issue a questionnaire to the students about their experience in the class so that we can have a process of continuing improvement. And by far, the Elmers are always rated really high for the value that they add to the course. So if you're interested in doing that, we'll give you some information during this presentation to help you out a little bit and how to make that happen. And at the end, I'll wrap up with some reiteration about this fall class coming up and the schedule for that. So here is our first radio license class here at W0TLM. Okay, maybe it doesn't really go back that far, but the thing that I do remember, not quite this far back, but when I first joined W0TLM, and that was in 2009, okay, it was whenever I got back here to Colorado and had the opportunity to get engaged with ham radio and join this organization. Well, at the time, there was kind of an old guard leadership in charge of this club, and I think we had almost 10 members. And the old guard leadership was very, very interested in RACES and getting people qualified for RACES and supporting El Paso County Emergency Communications, which was a great thing. And that's it. They didn't care about anything else. I was a little disappointed in that because I wanted to do other fun stuff. I was interested in all of the other aspects of amateur radio. I wanted to build antennas and go do fox hunts and contests and meet other hams and all of these wonderful things. And I was a little disappointed at the narrow perspective that the club had at that time. My Elmer at the time was Bob, K0NR, Bob Whitty. And I talked to Bob about this, and he said, basically, yeah, that's just kind of the way it's been for a long time. And I said, well, what do you think? Would you like to do other things? He's like, that might be fun. Yeah. You know how Bob is. He's very, very sober in his responses and calm and collected. So we kind of got together a little proposal and went to the leadership and said, we think we need to expand the club and let's do these other things and get more people involved and serve the community better. And one of the things that we would like to do is run a license class. Well, they didn't like that idea very much. And we said, hey, it's okay, you keep doing races, we'll do this other thing, and we'll just have kind of different aspects of our club available for the populace. Well, as it turns out, those guys decided that they just needed to go off and do their own thing, and they kind of left and abandoned us. And so Bob and I sort of inherited the leadership of the club at that time in 2009. And along with 2 or 3 other individuals who were pretty heavily involved. One of them was Steve. Where'd Steve go? He left? Yeah, he didn't want to hear me talk, I guess. But Steve Galichet was one of them. We kind of began to put together a little bit different view or vision for the club. And we said, how can we garner more membership? Because this is pretty weak right now. And you all are probably well aware that the number one way of growing a ham radio organization is offering license classes. Well, my professional background is in education, okay? Professor at the Air Force Academy for many years. So who do you think it fell to develop the license class? Yeah, but with a lot of help from Bob, and still to this day with tremendous support from Bob in doing this. So this was not really our first class. This was actually our first class. So that occurred, those events occurred in the early fall of 2009. We had our first class in January of 2010. Okay, we spun it up that quickly and that efficiently. And this is a photograph of our graduates here from 2010. There's, look at that. If you zoom in, you'll see Bob there, young-looking Bob Whitty, and I don't know who that guy with the black beard is. But yeah, that's been a while back in 2010, 17 years now. So we held this at the Tri-Lakes Fire Department Station number 1 out on 105 going toward Palmer Lake in their classroom, a very nice facility. We were very appreciative of them allowing us to use that facility. We had 21 technician graduates in that class. A couple of whom are in this meeting. So there's Liz, KT0LIZ, hasn't aged a day in 17 years, right? And online there is Dan, N0OLD. So there you are, Dan, looking mighty swift there as a youngster back in 2009 or 2010. We also had a number of Boy Scouts from Troop 6 here in Monument. I was an assistant scoutmaster for that troop, and so we gathered many of those boys. You can see some of them here, and their parents in the class. And it was very successful. We licensed over the course of a couple or 3 years about 40 to 50 people all total, about half of those being scouts, the other half being their parents in the course of offering license classes. So we had a great time with those boys. This is my son Cole, W0COL, and his friend David, who were in the class. And we kept these kids hyped up on sugar the whole time. We had Hershey's Kisses and little mini candy bars of chocolate. And we'd ask questions in the classroom. And anytime someone answered a question correctly, especially the scouts, grab a piece of candy and throw it at them. So what that resulted in, and you can see Cole's munching on some, it looks like a Hershey's Kiss here. He's got his hand in the air permanently. Because he wants to be whoever it is that answers the question next. And he's like, I'm not waiting for a question, call on me. So it was a fun time for the boys. They got a lot of rewards out of this. They were very proud of themselves for earning their license. And then we subsequently, with these boys, with these scouts and many of the others that we licensed, operated a couple of kind of hybrid fox hunts, combination of fox hunt and land navigation tasks, geocaching, if you're familiar with that old hobby. Put those things together and up in the woods by Woodland Park, up at Farish Recreation Area and the National Forest out by that location. And had these boys going all through the woods looking for transmitters and finding geocaches, and one would lead to the next. And so it was a big circuit that they had to complete. It made the cover of QST magazine for us. I wrote an article up. They even sent a photographer out to follow the boys around and photograph the boys in the woods. And we had a pretty substantial expose. Is still available online at Scouting America. Anyway, it was an all in-person 2-day format, 2 consecutive Saturdays, and the exam was issued at the end of the second Saturday. So the students would read in advance, come to class, and we would review and quiz them and get them ready for the exam. And then at the end of the second Saturday, they would take the exam, and we had very good success. At that time, there were really 2 resources to use. One was the one we selected, the Gordon West technician class book back in the day. The other that we looked at, of course, was the ARRL manuals. But what we found was those ARRL manuals were at too high a level. They were over the heads of many of our students because obviously with the Boy Scouts, we weren't requiring any kind of technical background. We were taking anyone and everyone who wanted to be licensed in amateur radio. So we went with the basically brainless memorization book that Gordon West put. There were some explanations in there a little bit, but we weren't real happy with that book. But the ARRL book was out of the question for what we wanted to do in the audience that we had. But because we were not real satisfied with this resource, and at that time there was not a lot of other resources available, I chose around the 2011 time frame to do something better. And so I wrote my own book, targeted for the kind of class that we were offering. And so after a couple of offerings with the Gordon West book, we transitioned to my ham radio school technician license course book. And that was in 2012. Our first offering with this book was in 2012. And we have continued using the ham radio school content since that time in various forms. So other history about this class, we have operated nominally 2 classes per year ever since. And this class this fall will be our 33rd class offering by this organization. Okay, and so that represents over 1,000 graduates of our classes of various license levels that we have pushed through these classes. We've expanded to the general license course in 2014. I took on the task of drafting a ham radio school general license course book from 2012 and 2013, and then in 2014 we used it to offer a general license class for W0TLM. We expanded again in 2023 with the extra class, our first offering of extra class, after Bob and I co-authored an extra license course book to operate that course with, and also develop the presentation materials for the class. We reformatted the course structure to use online content in 2024, and that's where we're at right now. So the ham radio school material that I developed in the book, I translated into an online format that I'll describe for you in more detail here in just a moment. But that's the format that we're using now. The students use the online course as the primary resource, the primary study resource for the classes that we offer. So this is that current license structure or license class structure. We use the online course from Ham Radio School, and it includes an ebook that you see scrolling through right here now, full color version ebook. It's just like the print book in terms of its sequence and chapters and so forth. But it also contains video lessons presented by yours truly of each of the lessons in the book, or each chapter, each section really. And we also provide review summaries. So this is a succinct summarization of all the question pool items that are covered in a lesson. And each lesson has its own quiz, full question and 4 option responses to choose from for the student, and practice exams that operate in the same way for the course overall. And finally, what we term depth media. These are audio files, video, articles that Bob and I primarily have written, and external links to content that are related to each of the lessons in the course. And these are optional for the student, but they take the student deeper into the topics associated with the given lesson. So a student goes through and reads, watches the videos, reviews, and quizzes, and then goes to these depth options and can learn more beyond the exam content to the extent that they wish. And because the student gets a subscription to this online course indefinitely, they can come back again and again over time. There's no termination point for the term of the subscription here. So that's kind of the study resource that the students are using. And they study this content asynchronously, on their own schedules, essentially. So, some students may want to study, they'll be like Stephen, they want to study in the middle of the night, okay? Other students may be like me, they got to get up and have a cup of coffee and they're ready to go, study this. So whatever the student's schedule permits, they are able to study with that personal schedule. However, we impose on them a pacing schedule that has a set of progress milestones each week that they must meet. So in other words, they've got a listing here of the chapters that they've got to cover in a given week of the class. And then you'll notice here where it says Zoom reviews, that's a weekly review session that we conduct online, a remote meeting session with the students to answer questions about that week's coverage, to quiz them, to do practice Q&A on the question pool items that they were to cover, and also to provide practical advice on practical operations or anything else that the student has questions about. The other thing you'll notice is each week we have what's called an Elmer check-in. So this is again where those of you who have served as Elmers understand the Elmer basically pings the student, usually by a phone call, and says, hey, how's it going? What are you having trouble with? How are you progressing? What can I help you with? What do you need in support?
Stu, for the people that are thinking about being Elmers, is that Stu graciously provides the Elmers with access to the books as well.
Oh, or the online course, yeah.
And the online course, yes. Which I don't know about the rest of you, but I tend to forget a few details over
See,
time.
That's the advantage of being an Elmer. You can get refreshed and learn things yourself.
And part of that, getting prepped for the Elmer check-in meetings, is review what they've been studying. And in the way that I use it is I go through and look at all the blue highlighted stuff that are specific to the questions.
Right.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yep, got that. I better review that one because I don't remember how that worked.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
And then you can go read the assignment or look at the video if you prefer, or even the depth options, because they're all related to those topics lesson by lesson.
The Elmer is actually a great continuing learning opportunity.
Yeah. Yes, and in fact, that's where the content we're going to look at here in a little bit, the examples, come from the new technician question pool content that rolls over starting July 1 for all exams, July 1 and through through June 30th of 2030. Can you grok that? 2030 we're talking about here. Where'd the time go? Tempus fugits, don't it? Yeah, it goes. So asynchronous lesson study for the student, but with those pacing milestones and the weekly reviews and the Elmer support weekly. And by the way, Elmer duties, just for any of you who are entertaining, perhaps joining us in this, you're going to be assigned 2 to 4 students, depending upon the class size and the availability, and also geographic location. We try to get people close together geographically, so if they want to have a shack visit or that kind of thing. Check-ins with each student once per week. That should say once, not one per week. Once per week, check in with each student. Usually that's a phone call or even a text message or getting on a remote meeting. Or you can tag up at the coffee shop if you want and chat. I've done that before. And then inquire about student progress, answer questions about the course content, and be encouraging, be positive with them. Say, hey, you got this, come on, you can do this. This is not that hard. And also attend our weekly review sessions to report on those student statuses and progress, and to assist with any Q&A, and to relate operational experiences to the students that you may have that are unique. So we kind of share all of the experiences there. And then assist with the Get on the Air session when that is scheduled along with the class. So that kind of gives you a sketch of what you might get involved with as an Elmer for one of these courses. And lastly, we have a VE session with alternative sessions as backup around the Colorado Springs and Denver area that are regularly scheduled. Well, we usually have a dedicated session for the class that we encourage the students to attend. And we also provide them information about how to get on an online exam, one of those opportunities, especially if they live in a remote area and it's inconvenient for them to travel a lot to get back to an exam session. Okay, so that's kind of the class structure here. Let me transition and talk a little bit about some of the methods that we use. Because in formulating this years ago, 17 years ago, well, 16 years ago now when I started thinking about this particular kind of course content, what do you think was the number one driver in terms of kind of how do I want to teach? How do I want to present this? What do you think was an emphasis item for me? Any ideas? Especially those of you who have been in my classes.
Make it fun.
Well, that's one. Yeah, lots of sugar. Make it fun. Keep them awake. No, but one of the things that I really emphasize or try to emphasize in all of my instruction, whether it's ham radio or whether it was systems engineering at the Air Force Academy or whatever, is visualization. I'm a very visual thinker. I have to have a picture to think with. And so I have found over the years that really translates pretty well in ham radio in helping people think about some of these rather ethereal concepts associated with electromagnetics and electronics and other kinds of scientific sorts of topics that we get into in these courses. So here's a few examples. We'll look at some more of these in detail as examples, but we really try to embed as much graphics and animations and video and visual analogies as possible in these courses. And each of these courses really depicts hundreds and hundreds of these things. Okay, I mean, it's 2 days, it used to be 2 days long, and now it's about 10 hours of video presentation, 10 to 11 hours of video presentation, all of which is just packed with graphics and video and animations. So let's take a look at a few of the examples here to give you kind of an idea of the kinds of graphics that we use. So in our chapter on propagation, here's one of our still images that we use that depicts the ionospheric layers and the diurnal cycle, the day-night cycle of what happens to it, where the D layer dissipates. Well, let me use my pointer for everybody online. Where the D layer dissipates, the E layer gets weaker on the night side, and the F layers combine. But on the daylight side, you got the 4 distinct layers, D, E, F1, and F2. In our chapters on wavelength and frequency and electromagnetic waves, what they are and how the nature of them, we try to use an analogy to water waves. So we say, oh, think of ocean waves that are long and they're rolling into shore with low frequency, right? Crashing on the shore. But in a tidal pool, you drop a pebble there, you get high frequency, short wavelengths. And they ripple out pretty quickly at a high frequency out to the edge of the pool. Giving them visual analogies like that they can keep in mind. Because remember, our students, just like those young scouts, they don't have a great technical background to fall back on. And so we try to provide them very common analogies and visual tools that they can use to help remember and more importantly, to understand some of the concepts that we have to try to impart in these courses. In our chapter on processing signals, I got a question one time from a student that said, Stu, what are you talking about when you say processing signal? What is signal processing? I don't get it. So again, not a real strong technical background, and I never really even thought about that someone might not understand what we mean when we say signal processing. So we introduce a chapter with a little video segment like this. Here's our Elroy sitting at his radio. The RF induces voltages on the antenna, and those signals roll right on down the transmission line into the transceiver, where magic happens, right? And audio is produced.
CQ 10 meters.
So we say, wait, let's go back to that magic part. It's not really magic. This is what we're talking about. What's going on inside the radio when we transmit and receive? How those electronics are manipulating the signals, processing those signals inside of here. So just to kind of give a framework to the student. And we follow that up with some additional animations and also still images that depict processing streams in a simplified manner. So we'll depict a block diagram like you see here, where we've got amplifiers and mixers and filters, oscillators, all depicted as just a block of some sort. And then between those blocks, we see time domain indications of the signals and what's happening to them. So for example, in this heterodyne receiver depiction, we've got a weak signal coming in the antenna that gets amplified, so the amplitude is boosted. Then we have an oscillator that sends a signal to mix with that, and we get the sum and difference products out at different frequencies, a higher frequency and a lower frequency. One of those is filtered away, the higher one, and leaving the low frequency here. Well, that goes to an amplifier, it gets boosted, and then we do the same process again. We mix with a beat frequency oscillator signal and filter again, which is omitted for brevity, and we end up recovering the audio, the original audio, the very lowest frequency part of that signal. And so most students can, pardon the pun, resonate with this and follow it, okay? And it gives them at least a high level, surface level kind of understanding of what signal processing is going on, in this case, in a heterodyne receiver. We also describe transmitters, and we also describe digital processing in similar kinds of graphic illustrations. In our antennas presentations, we like to start out by illustrating resonance, because resonance is so fundamental to the operation of antennas. So we make the analogy to a mechanical swing set.
CQ, CQ, CQ. Kilo Tango 0 Lima India Zulu calling CQ 10 meters. KT 0 LIZ calling CQ and standing by. CQ,
Yeah, so there's
CQ,
Liz
CQ.
making a call, and you see her signals, her electric charges are moving up and down that antenna, just like Elroy here is pushing his daughter on the swing back and forth. So what we try to relate to the students is, yeah, that antenna and that transmitter is very much like that swing set. So you've got, on a swing set, you've got to time your pushes, right, with the oscillation period of the swing. And with just a little touch, a little push each time, you can keep that swing moving very efficiently, back and forth. Okay, that oscillation, the oscillatory period of that swing is dependent upon the length. Yeah, a long swing has a low frequency oscillation, right? And a short swing, like a little baby might be on, has a high frequency oscillation. Well, the same thing applies with the antenna, where the push is the AC signal coming out of this transmitter, right? and it's pushing on that antenna and sending electric charge back and forth. It takes a finite time, a very short time, but a finite time for that electrical charge to move back and forth along the length of that antenna. And so a long antenna requires a lower frequency push out of that transmitter, a lower frequency AC signal. And a short antenna, like for VHF or UHF, requires a much higher frequency push in order to achieve that resonance like you get with the swing set. So it's a great mechanical analogy that any kid can understand, right? So again, that's just one of the analogies. Here's another visual that we like to use to describe SWR in the antennas chapter. And so we've got a transmitter here on the left, an antenna on the right, and let's assume we've got a little bit of an impedance mismatch at this antenna. When you have an impedance mismatch at the antenna, you're going to get a little bit of your power or your voltage reflected back down the transmission line. And the forward signal that's going to be indicated in blue and the reflected signal that's going to be indicated in kind of this brown color will interact, and the voltages will sum together in that transmission line. So here they come. We got the forward signal and the reflected signal, and we'll focus on this yellow area here where the signals at this instant in time are perfectly aligned, right? They are in phase. And so the voltages sum together at that, at that instant in time, and you get what's reflected here or depicted in black here. You get a higher voltage. And that is, in fact, the maximum voltage that can be measured on that transmission line. Well, we'll set that aside for the student, and then we'll do this again, but we'll depict an instance in time where the forward and reflected signals are exactly out of phase, 180 degrees out of phase. And at this position, as you're probably familiar, the signals are going to counteract one another. The positive voltage here and the negative voltage here are going to counteract, and you end up with a lower voltage overall. And in fact, when they're 180 degrees out of phase, that is the minimum voltage that you can measure on that transmission line. And we'll set that aside. And in reality, as these two signals cross and travel opposite directions, there's going to be voltages measured that are all values in between the maximum and minimum that we've depicted down here. And so you'll get kind of this oscillation of that back and forth, up and down, maximum to minimum, maximum to minimum. And we call that a standing wave. And then the maximum and minimum, you can create a ratio of V max over V min, the maximum voltage over the minimum voltage, of that standing wave on the transmission line. And that is the standing wave ratio. So we also show them, hey, you can measure this by measuring power as well. We won't bother with that. But we have this illustration and then another dynamic illustration via an app that I've coded up that I showed at the last meeting in the show and tell that illustrates essentially the standing wave, the forward and reflected waves all together in a very dynamic illustration. In our electrical section, we use this little picture to depict Ohm's law. Okay, yeah, I remember the days when this was my life. It really was. You remember those days, don't you, honey? Well, Liz was always pushing me along, right? I'm the current here trying to flow through, and Liz is trying to push me to go, get it going, get your flow going there, and then my kids are doing everything they can to tie me up and keep me from going. So it illustrates, E equals IR, or voltage equals the current times the resistance. And so we've got a little dynamic version of that. Get going, Elroy. Oh, there he goes. So just a little bit of fun to give someone a common view of, okay, how does this Ohm's law thing actually work? And that will help stick it in their mind. They'll say, oh, I remember that cartoon, the guy trying to squeeze through the tube, and his wife was kicking his butt, making him go. That kind of thing will stick in someone's head. So we also have a little more sober illustrations of things like making electrical measurements. Here we're illustrating that for measuring a voltage, you want to be in parallel with the circuit across the the element that you're measuring the voltage drop across, in this case, a simple resistor. And for measuring current, you want to have all of that current flowing through the device to accurately measure it, so you want to be connected in series. And it just gives them a little picture to work with. In the electronics section, we use a water analogy to illustrate how transistors work. So this little mechanical trough system that you see here has a trough that comes in, and there's a little gate in brown right here, and it's mechanically connected to this bigger gate over here. And so when you run some water through the small trough here, the base or gate of the transistor, it will lift up this gate right here, and that mechanically connects over here and lifts up the larger gate that lets a big flood of water through. And depending upon the variability of this input water, you're going to get more or less current flowing through the big trough. And that's exactly how the current flow through a transistor works. And so it gives, again, the student a visual analogy to work with in remembering how transistors actually function.
Do you like Crater Lake?
Up in Oregon?
Yep.
I've never been there. I flew over it once in the B-52. I'm sorry?
That's what the picture was in the reservoir. That was Wizard Island.
Oh, is that right? Okay. I didn't do that intentionally. I just, that came from some clip art somewhere. Okay. And for our digital chapter, we start out showing the fundamentals of digital communications by binary FSK. So binary frequency shift keying. And we just run this little. So we got two frequencies there, one representing 0, the other representing 1. And it'll speed up as it goes. And then we're using ASCII code here to represent the characters. And they're precipitating out here to spell out digital. And so it just gives the student a basic idea of, oh, I see, tones equal binary digits and groups represent characters. We also have an online app that I also demonstrated at the last meeting in the show and tell that does a similar kind of illustration, although much more elaborate, for binary FSK, but also for 4 tones and for 16 tones. So you can use 4 FSK or 16 FSK and switch between them and see how the efficiency of the transmission changes as the number of tones increases. We like to have a little bit of fun sometimes too, okay? So purely for entertainment purposes, we sometimes do things like this, this for our space contacts.
Welcome back, friends. Stu here, W0STU for Ham Radio School. This lesson, space contacts. Now, I know it will disappoint many of you, but this lesson is not about contacting the space aliens with your station. Rather, this lesson is all about using amateur radio satellites that are essentially repeaters in orbit. What? What is it? You're looking at me like I've got a human growing out of my head.
So just for fun, and to give them, a little entertainment value. But then we follow up, of course, with a very thorough treatment of how amateur radio satellites work with numerous illustrations. You might recognize some of these folks. Used with permission. This is an introduction to our section on call signs. How call signs are structured, how they're assigned, what kinds of call signs there exist for special stations and clubs, and et cetera. But we wanted to illustrate how, there are people in this room who I could call their first name and their call sign, and I have no idea what their last name is. Yeah, I could, okay, I won't embarrass myself or anybody else with that. But we put this together to kind of illustrate the point. And again, you'll recognize somebody in here, probably, Lauren.
Welcome to the W0TLM Club, Dave. Some of our members want to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Barb, K0BE, Secretary Treasurer. I'm Trisha, K0TRD.
Lauren, KE0HZ, Vice President. I'm Jake, W0JAK.
That's my
Good
kid.
to meet you, Dave. Hi, I'm Cole,
That's my other kid. It
W0COL.
was easy to use them. So
Howdy,
didn't have to
y'all.
ask permission.
I'm Dave, KF5CLZ. Really glad to be here.
That's my friend Dave from Mississippi.
Oh, hey, there comes Stu,
Oh, who that is,
W0STU.
And at that point, when Robert waves at me, I come into the picture and begin the lesson, okay? So again, just a little bit of an illustration, something to stick in their head to help them remember how call signs work. So there, you've got them right there. So again, those are some of the visualizations, just a handful of the many, many, many different visualizations that we use, especially in the video version, the video lessons of the course. Other instructional methods, however, that are kind of embedded and inherent within these are multi-mode instruction. So the course presents each lesson as the reading that you saw scrolling earlier with the color book, the videos, as you saw some examples of some of the snippets here, the quiz and reviews, and the depth elaboration. So the student can kind of pick and choose which of those tend to work for him or her in affecting their study. Also repetition, especially with the question pool items. So the student gets hit with those question pool items in the reading, in the videos once again, in the reviews once again, in the quizzes once again, in the practice exams at the end of the course, and even in some of those depth media, the audio, video, articles, and links that we provide as ancillary learning material. Some of those emphasize question pool items as well. So repetition really is there for those question pool items. And then most recently, we've tried to improve interaction, student interaction that can be kind of self-administered by the student. And so we've created these visualization apps that are designed to kind of respond to student input. And essentially, the student can open these apps that illustrate various principles and just fiddle around with them and learn by the interaction of fiddling around with the app. And I want to show you at least one example here, and then I'll probably shut up and take some questions if you got them. So we've got to date 13 of these. They include illustrations of AM and FM modulation, so amplitude modulation, frequency modulation, and CW modulation. Showed, I think, the AM again last meeting at the show and tell. An FSK digital mode simulator, like I mentioned earlier, with the binary and the 4 and the 16 FSK options. A QRM and filtering simulator. So this simulates single sideband ops or CW ops, and how high cut and low cut filtering can be adjusted and how moved around to help alleviate QRM in contacts. A Fourier transform visualizer, which is on the right over here, and this is the one I'll show you in more detail in just a moment. But it illustrates how multiple sine waves and harmonics can be put together to form very complex signals. Time and frequency domain analyzer, so you can record your own audio here for a few seconds and then analyze that or look at it in the time domain and simultaneously in the frequency domain to see what frequency components are involved in that recording of your voice, perhaps through your computer. An SWR wave simulator. Again, this was kind of like the simulation or the illustration we looked at earlier with the forward and reflected waves, creating SWR. And then an Ohm's law simulator, where the student can adjust resistance of a resistor and the voltage of a power source and see what the results are, all the way up to blowing up an LED. And it actually simulates the LED exploding. So, and then we have a dipole antenna and screwdriver antenna SWR analyzers. You can change the design of an antenna in terms of its length, its loading, applied frequencies, whether or not you're using a match, an antenna tuner or not, and take a look at the design of various antennas. And most recently, a Maidenhead Grid Explorer. You can put a Maidenhead Grid Square ID in, and it'll map it for you anywhere in the world, and you can kind of scroll around and explore with that.
Stu, when you do the Ohm's Law simulator, do you do any complex impedance in that one, or do you talk about complex impedance in the filtering? Or is that pending?
You know, it's been so long since I looked at it, I'd have to go back and see if we included that in the filtering, not in the Ohm's Law. The Ohm's Law is a very simple, targeted for technician license class content. And it's really just a look at calculating, using Ohm's Law and illustrating, you know, voltage, current, and resistance.
So just for clarification for me, you use the term high cut and low cut when mentioning filters.
Yeah.
I'm more accustomed to high pass or low pass.
Well,
Is
it
a
depends on
high,
if you're referring to the nature of the filter, or if you're referring to what you're setting on the receiver. And I'm referring to what you would set on a DSP type receiver as the high cut position in the received signal and the low cut position.
so the cut is where you start the attenuation. Is that
Correct. Yeah, and so the pass band is in between low and high.
right?
And I can show you that here if you want. But
No, it just, the cut is where you're actually, would be the outside the pass band. And I,
that's correct. That's right.
okay.
Let me go, I could have just gone over to, okay, so well, here is a, uh-oh. I stopped sharing here somehow. Sorry, let me see if I can get that back. Do you know what happened there, Stephen?
I can guess, but why?
Okay, so anyway. Okay, so here are the set of apps and some descriptions of them on the Ham Radio School website. And the one that I would like to illustrate that we recently produced is this Fourier transform visualizer. And just as a quick explanation of what you're seeing here, you have a rotating vector going around this circle. Here's the tail and the head of the vector. The head of the vector is rotating around the circle. And if you plot the amplitude, that is a sine wave, right? Or a cosine. So this is a very simple one frequency, and one frequency is indicated in this panel right here. And this is kind of how a sine wave is created, by a rotating vector with a constant speed and a single radius rotating around. Now, as you probably understand, if we add another frequency to this, we're going to change the output. We're going to change that sine wave. And in fact, that's what a complex signal is comprised of. A complex signal, like a voice signal, for instance, is comprised of many, many different sine waves put together in what we'd call vector addition. And in order to add vectors together, at least in this particular rotating vector scenario, you take the tail of the new vector and put it on the head of the existing vector. So let's add to this an odd harmonic. We're going to add the third harmonic. That is a vector that's rotating 3 times the speed of this one, or 3 times around for every 1 time this vector rotates around. And we're going to put that vector right on the head of this rotating vector here. Here we go. Boom. So it's depicted in red, and it's rotating around 3 times every time that green vector or blue vector, whatever it is going. And you'll notice that they each cross the 0 line right here simultaneously. Boom. They're in phase with one another that way. And they're crossing the 0 point at the same time every time they go around. Well, you can see it changed the output. The amplitude, the resultant amplitude of the output signal is changed to this little hump kind of form. Now let's add another vector. Let's put another rotating vector on the head of the red vector here, and we're going to make it 5 times the frequency, the 5th harmonic of that fundamental. And it's in green right there. And it's going around, it's 1/5 the amplitude. The red one is 1/3 of the amplitude. This new one is 1/5 of the amplitude of the original vector by design. And you can see it's made yet another change in the output. And if we continue to do this with every odd harmonic, So we'll add the seventh harmonic here. A major seventh, okay. Then you can kind of see what's happening. If we continue to add harmonic, and by the way, down at the bottom here, you can see the frequency domain of each of those signals that's being added. Each one of them is a little bit lower and a little bit lower amplitude, and they are on the odd harmonics, starting with 1, then 3, then 5, then 7, and we can add up to 4 more. I'm just going to go ahead and populate the whole panel out here.
Gosh, it sure looks like a square wave.
Yeah, so if you do this to infinity, as Fourier taught us, you get a square wave. Now, that's all fine and dandy, right? But our voices don't really produce square waves, right? Not so much. I mean, you can kind of go, and it might be sort of a square wave. But each of these panels down here has a frequency adjustment, an amplitude adjustment, and a phase adjustment. So Lauren, what's going to happen if I change the frequency of one of these signals comprising this complex signal up here?
It's going to alter it.
Yeah.
And it might start to look like an AM signal.
So we're going to take this fifth harmonic and make the frequency a little bit higher. And we'll change the amplitude of the third harmonic a little bit. And wow, yeah, now we're starting to get some craziness, right? A much more complex looking signal. But it's still repeating. You'll notice that it looks the same every time, right? Well, that's because it's still in phase. They're all still in phase, crossing the 0 line all at the same time. Now, if we change the amplitude, or I'm sorry, the phase of one of these, let's change the phase of this third harmonic. I'll slide it up a little bit. We will then get non-repeating behavior and an even more complex signal. So all of these kinds of principles of Fourier's construction of signals can be illustrated with this application, very visually for the student, okay? And the student can, in fact, go to our website, open these up, play with them, and intuitively learn through input and resetting things. If we take off the integer harmonics, we can change it to fractional harmonics, and then we get really non-repeating behavior. So this is kind of the way these apps work. And just to show Lauren, here's the single sideband, and I've got, let me see if I can squeeze this up a little bit for you. I can change so here's the low cut. You see the changes, low cut and high cuts. They're just like we were discussing a minute ago. And this actually will output audio. I won't play it for you here today, but it'll output audio, and the audio changes in accordance with how you set these filters, just like you would on a digital single sideband receiver.
Yeah, so I guess where it just gets to be a little bit confusing is that if you described it of where the high pass starts, it's at where the low cut, and the high cut is where the low pass
starts. Yeah,
starts.
I understand.
So
and we we treat that the way you're describing in our filter simulator here. So this is where I could record some audio, and I can choose different types of filters: a band pass filter, a low pass filter, a high pass filter, a notch filter, and hear the results on the recorded audio. We can also use canned white noise here, and you can adjust the filtering to hear the effects on the white noise. So, okay, so enough of that. But we have, again, several different apps here. I will show you, since you asked about Ohm's law, here's we got a filament lamp or an LED. We can change its color, but then we can adjust the voltage, and you get more current throughput with the higher voltage, and you get a brighter LED up to a point, and then you blow it up because it states the specs for the LED in here as well. Okay. All right, enough of that fun. Let me go back to my, if I can figure out how to get back there. I guess I kind of shut it down, so let me do this again. Whoops, we did that already. Oh, I guess I got to share again. And here, share, okay. Okay, so let me tell you real quickly a little bit about our fall 26 classes coming up. If it will go, oh, there we go. So kickoff session will be Saturday, October 24th, 1 to 4 p.m. at the Woodmore Barn here in Monument. And students will be studying in advance of this, the first couple of chapters. So when they arrive for the kickoff session, they'll already have some study under their belt, and that tends to let them ask better questions and get a little more out of the demos that we'll be providing. We'll be providing radio demos of repeater ops and simplex ops and single sideband ops there at the barn for them. And so they'll have a little better comprehension of what's going on thanks to the advanced study prior to the kickoff session. And that online course facilitates that really well for us. As I stated earlier in the meeting, we're going to be offering tech plus general in parallel, and the students can do either combination of those. We do have to provide approval for those that want to do both of them, because a student kind of needs to be a little bit technically oriented to be successful with that, we've found over the years. And if they don't have that tech background, we're usually going to say, not a good idea, get the tech first, then work on general. We want Elmers, we want you. So if you're interested, a couple of things. Here's my email address, scribble that down. If you want, after we're wrapped up here in 30 seconds, come see me. I'll take your information, your contact information, and we'll make you an Elmer and get you signed up with a term subscription for that online content. And you can really help us out with this class and help these students. And lastly, the VE session is planned for November 21st, as we said, at Monument Library. And Barb will be lining that up here pretty shortly, I think. Yeah. Yep, it's got to be 90 days in advance or something like that, right? So that is how our license classes work. And if you got any questions, I'll be happy to entertain those.
When is a VE session?
When?
What?
What? Volunteer examiner, that's the exam session.
The actual test?
Yeah, where we issue tests, issue the license exams.
Okay. I'm thinking it's like VECs and.
Well, the VECs,
people.
oh, no. This is the actual exam session.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, that's I guess our common nomenclature for just talking about when we're going to hold a test session, yeah. Any other questions about what we're doing here? Yes, sir.
What's the total count on the number of in-person sessions?
Probably just the two. The kickoff session will be in person necessarily if we're going to do demos and stuff, and then the exam session. Otherwise, we'll be using Zoom for those periodic reviews each week, and the Elmers will be using usually a telephone, but sometimes personal contact, in-person meetings if the student wants to do that.
Do you welcome or expect the Elmers to participate in the Zoom sessions also?
Yes, we like for them to. They, it's not 100%, but we really prefer if you could make it to be there. If you got a conflict, it's not a big deal. We can certainly cover for you. I know Lauren misses them all the time.
Life happens.
Yeah, Daryl.
Over the last many years, I've heard reports of the classes where they are full or have a lot of students. How do you advertise these?
Well, the primary way is word of mouth, frankly, and we also maintain, thanks to Bob K0NR, several email lists and also email contacts to various organizations, other radio clubs, four-wheel drive organizations in the state, ARIES organizations in the state. And so we spread it primarily through personal contact and email contact to those lists of other clubs and so forth. And we've never had trouble, packing people in. We've had over 40 students sometimes in a technician class. It varies from year to year for reasons unknown. Sometimes I think the offerings kind of gobble up everybody who's interested, and things drop off a little bit, and then they pick back up. But anywhere between 20 and 40 students is pretty typical for our club.
The new format has allowed for people to join the class from a greater distance. There's been a lot from Denver, but there's been some out of state.
Yeah,
people.
that's true. It has, that's one of the advantages of operating this way, is that the student doesn't necessarily have to be in, in our general location. Now, we tend to keep it that way. We have not allowed a lot of enrollment from outside the state, but we have had people drive in from, 3 or 4 hours away to the kickoff session, and then attend the remote meetings, and then do their own exam online or at a session near where they're located. So I remember, it's been 2 or 3 years ago now, we had a guy that drove in from just east of Grand Junction to participate in our class. I think that's the farthest away that we've ever had anybody. Although we have had, on occasion, a student who says, hey, I'm going to be traveling out of state, like you're alluding to, and they tie into our meetings from out of state, which is not a big deal. Great question, though. Tom?
At the introduction session for the extra class, we have a lot of people in there.
Yes.
Were most of those, or a lot of them, online only? Or, because then it didn't seem like, with the number of Elmers and the number of people, that didn't seem to match that room full of people. So how are they connecting?
I'm not sure I'm tracking with you.
Like you had, 4 students?
Right.
And, I don't know how many Lauren had, but by the time you took all the Elmers, that didn't add up to, there were so many people in that room that wasn't just the 3 or 4 Elmers that you had, didn't add up to the same amount of people.
I'm not sure. We had almost everyone who had signed up for the class at that session, I recall. I think we had 2 people that had conflicts and were not able to make it. Okay. But we had a goodly number of folks in that class. Yeah.
People in that intro, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it probably was just those were the students, and then then they go and do their own study, and we have the remote sessions. That was really the only time that we got everyone together there, because many of them did their own thing when it came to the exam, something in their local area or an online exam. But many of them did attend. I think 50% thereabout attended our dedicated session here in Monument. Yes, ma'am.
Talk about the really good pass rates for people completing the class?
Sure, happy to do that. Over the years, we've kind of prided ourselves in the fact that we have very consistently across the license classes achieved a 90% plus pass rate on the first exam tries. So especially at the technician level, it's not uncommon for us to have a 100% pass rate on the technician exam for a class of 40 folks. And I was actually really happy. I was listening to N0XLF repeater one day, and a couple of guys were jawing on there. And one of them brought up the topic, said, hey, did you hear about that Monument Club? They had a class and they made something like 40 new hams. I wanted to get on there and say, yeah, that was me, dude. So word kind of gets around. You were asking about how do we advertise this. Word kind of gets out, and we post the flyers on to different clubs and through the different organizations, and it spreads pretty quickly. But word of mouth, I think, is probably the number one. And folks like yourself saying, hey, we're having a class coming up over here in W0TLM. You've been talking about getting your license. Come on, let's get in there and let's do it. So that kind of word of mouth and coercion really helps. Yeah. Somebody else here had a question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, kind of an odd one. So my wife and I just passed our test become techs.
Congrats.
A little over a month ago. Thank you. And we did pretty well on the questions. but there's a little bit that maybe we don't understand. So would it be possible for us to take both classes in November, because we want to go for our general,
Right.
but it would be nice to kind of, round out the technician in the process?
That's a great question, and let me address all of that for you. First of all, the answer is yes, across the board. You absolutely can enroll in both of those courses and get the background that you need in the technician course, and also study for general and pass that exam. We've had many people in the past do that, both from having their tech license and going for general, or having the general or the extra license even, and attending the extra class just to learn, because they said, I just memorized all the questions and answers and I really don't know what I'm doing. That is not an uncommon scenario. And in fact, that's why we transitioned years ago from that Gordon West book and approach to what I ended up producing as Ham Radio School, because we just weren't satisfied with the level of comprehension. We didn't want people to just brainlessly memorize. And I know that's what a lot of the kids did, and the scouts, some of them. They got some comprehension, but a lot of things they also just memorized, I'm sure. And that's just not consistent with our philosophy of lifelong learning and education, and how to get involved properly, I guess, in the amateur radio endeavor. We really want to impart concepts to folks. And we hear and have heard over the years exactly what you just espoused. I got my license, but I feel like there's a lot missing in here, and maybe you guys can help me understand some of this stuff a little better. That's exactly what W0TLM license classes are founded on, is allowing a student to gain as much comprehension and understanding as they possibly can. That doesn't mean they learn and understand everything, but they certainly learn a lot along the way. And that's also what we founded, or what I founded Ham Radio School content on as well, is real understanding. That's kind of our niche, and our motto is really get it, elevate your learning to where you're really understanding things. So, yes.
Stu, from the Elmer perspective, I would say that's a bulk of the conversation that goes on, is kind of not what the answer is, but why are we learning that particular thing, and how does it apply to actually operating a radio?
Right. Yeah, what's the operational relevance of what is in the exam? Now, I can't stand here and tell you every question in that exam pool is really relevant to your day-to-day operation. No, that's just not true. But not at all. When you not at all. But when you examine the FCC's stated purpose of the amateur radio service, it becomes a little clearer why some of those questions are there and why some of those concepts are desired to be in the curriculum. Because the purpose is, beyond international goodwill, is to cultivate electronics expertise and the radio arts, that is radio science and engineering, and radio communications operational competencies. So all of those things together in that purpose, as stated by the FCC, kind of makes sense then when you look at those 400 plus questions in the question pool, and some of them being a little off the wall. You think, oh, okay, well, that's kind of part of the radio art, and that's definitely electrical engineering, and that's definitely radio science and propagation or what have you. So it's kind of a well-rounded curriculum in our classes based on that question pool. We built the course around the question pool, but while those question pool items are embedded in the content, we provide a lot of information around that so that you understand what the question's about, why it's relevant, and what the correct answer is, and why it's the correct answer. So that's why you won't get through our course in 4 hours like maybe some of the other folks that have products out there on the street or advertising. But you'll actually know what you're doing when you graduate from our course. You'll have a lot better idea, at least. And then you come to these club meetings and you form relationships and friendships with all of us here. And many of the people in this organization are really, really smart. and they have a lot of experience, years and years of experience. Nobody has as many years of experience as Jim, but besides Jim, lots of. But the point is, you will form relationships and friendships with people here that can really help you to learn and to help you advance your operations and your competencies in radio.
You talk about the question pool. When Barbara was taking, going from 0 to extra in 6 months, and I would look at those questions and say, this ain't the real world, folks.
I know, and there is some of that. There is some stretching of I don't want to say credibility, but some stretching of the relevance, I guess, of some of those question pool items. And it seems like some of them are just kind of the pet peeve of some person on the NCVEC that created that question, right? Or someone out in the community that submitted that idea to the NCVEC, and they said, oh yeah, I like that. It's new and different, and it solves our problem of trying to come up with a new question to replace this other one. So yeah, there are a handful of those things out there in the question pool for sure.
But you don't have to get 100% on the test.
Sea level, 74%, and you pass.
C's get degrees.
That's right. All right, I promised Robert I would probably go 45 minutes, and I did blow through that. I apologize. So I'm gonna cut us off there so we can wrap up and get home because he's got to go to work in the morning probably. All right, oh, congratulations. I am too, and I like it.
Hey, Stu, I just...
Oh, okay. Well, that can be different.
Just one quick comment.
Sure.
The graphics in the online program are unbelievable. They are so good. You just can't find graphics that are the level of animation and just the sheer volume of stuff in the material you've done is, I mean,
Well, I've been working on it
jaw-dropping.
17 years. What do you expect?
Well, I'm glad you finally got it right then.
I know. Exactly. Hey, thanks everybody for listening and sticking around. I appreciate that. And if you are interested in being an Elmer, come talk to me or send me an email at that address, and I will be happy to have you on board. And you don't have to be the expert, okay? You don't have to know everything or feel like you know everything. We're there to back you up. Me, Bob, K0NR, the other Elmers who have been with us for several iterations now, we've got your back. And if you get a question from one of your students that you don't know the answer to, hey, call us and we'll relate to you how to address that question, or you can refer your student to us. Just say, hey, Bob's the expert on that. Let me refer you over to him because he'll do a better job of explaining that one to you, and we'll be happy to respond to that student. But on many, many questions, you're going to find you've got vastly more understanding and comprehension than those brand new students do. Okay. So thanks a bunch. Appreciate it.